thank you so much for joining us on Undistracted. I really do appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
You've existed very much in the world of storytelling through the roles that you play, and I think through the things that you bring attention to in your own personal capacity. Why is that space, storytelling, something that you have for so long wanted to be a part of?
I think it all started for me when I was a kid, really. I just loved stories and telling stories and making stories up. In fact, a beautiful friend of mine, Louis Mascara, she actually passed away on the 1st of January last year. She was an older lady, but she was this wonderful, a very spiritual person. And she would tell me later, and she told my family, I had a niece that was not a very good child when it came to going to bed. Like she would have these sort of night terrors, like before bed, like screaming, crying, and she'd be really tired. And Louis remembered that I was, and I do remember it as well, but I was probably like 8 or 9. I didn't see it as being like a big thing, or maybe I could have even been younger, but for a long period of time, I was the only one that could put her to bed. And Louis came in with me one day and she lay on the bed and she said, she just couldn't believe it because she was lying there. And she spoke like this. She said, I couldn't believe the detail, Hughie said. I was listening. And she was telling me about, she remembered the story, but it was just a story that I was making up. But I'd go into a lot of detail about the imagery of what I could see. And it would calm my cousin Madeline down to the point where she would fall asleep. But no one could do it. And Louis wanted to know what it was that I was doing. So she came in and so I hadn't really thought about that until then, but I'm glad you asked. But I definitely love the power of storytelling. And I think I decided early on that I wanted to be an actor because I find it fun. And it's a chance to sort of change or educate or enlighten or just let people have a space to think about things in a different way, including myself, playing different characters. But it's that's a wonderful gift. I think that's why storytelling's been around since, Indigenous people would sit and tell stories because it's a great way of retelling history and also learning for the next generation.
And it gives us such an imaginative way, I think, of seeing our world, of experiencing people, of experiencing histories. And in your latest show, Tick, Tick, Boom, you're going to be bringing to life the story of an incredible guy, Jonathan Larson. He wrote Rent, he wrote a number of other productions, but sadly with Rent, he never got to see it because he passed away unexpectedly right before the preview show. Why is his life one that you really feel is deserving of such attention and this great production that his life is going to be showcased in?
Yeah, it's a really special story. He never got to see Tick Tick Boom either. He never got to see any of his shows up on stage properly, which makes this a really special show to be performing and be lucky enough to be playing this incredible person and literally bringing him back to life. And I intend to do so with everything that I've got because he gave everything to everything that he did. He gave all of himself over to his writing and his longing to exactly what we were just talking about really in the first question. So this is really, and I'm just thinking about this now, but come to think of it, it's kind of a dream role for me because it encapsulates everything that I love about my job, about acting. And also I don't get an opportunity to do musicals very often, but I sing and I studied dance like at a professional level and then and acting obviously, but this way I get to do everything. And Jonathan is someone that sort of came to me through, I suppose, over many, many years, but I didn't know a huge amount about him. But I owned Rent when I was a little boy because I loved musicals and I had all like the CDs, but I didn't really listen to it that much. It was probably a bit out there for but I did like looking at it and I loved the lyrics of his songs because they're so aspirational and they're reminding you, ironically, to sort of seize the day and live every day as though it's your last, which is something that I've always believed as well. And in the music that I'd written, like Speak Love, that was a song all about living every day as though it's your last, and telling people that you love them, because you just never know when they're going to be here or gone, or when you are. And so it's sort of very ironic that Jonathan wrote all this incredible material and then he died. And some of the subjects within or both Rent and Tick Tick Boom are about his friends who are dying.
Yeah.
And in real life, the friends that he was singing about, well, some of them that I know of, are still alive and he's not. So, but he thought that it was very much going to be the other way around. So I think there's something very poignant about looking at these stories with that knowledge. And I think it's important that people know Jonathan's story as well, because it really makes it so much more moving and like so poignant that and ironic that he was writing these great songs and then he never got to hear them or see them. He would have heard them. He never got to see them up on stage and realize. So I take all of that on stage with me and we'll do every single night to try and make sure that he is really there and alive and with me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pain in his experience, I think, of, you know, wanting to bring so much of these things to life and then to not personally realize it, but then in the urgency that he had and in the drive that he had, that inspires people as well. And I've heard you put it in the way that, you know, this show really forces people to ask, what do we do with this time that we have? What do we do with this life that we're given? How do you answer that question? Because I know it's going to be something different for each of us, but for you, how do you answer that question of what to do with your life, what to do with your time?
Well, I think these are all really good questions, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm enjoying it. He definitely spends the entire show with choices. And there's even a song called Johnny Can't Decide. He's constantly asking questions and being asked questions by his friends and people that love him about what he should be doing and what he isn't doing. And maybe it's time to make a tough choice. And I guess the moral and the main question is to choose between what you love for something that would be more easier or more safe. You know, I mean, he really was struggling financially, and it's very, very tough to work in our industry. It's really, really tough to keep it going and keep momentum when there's no money, you know. And I've had times where things have like slowed down, or, you know, work just disappears. And for COVID, I think that was the case for a lot of actors. And I was lucky during COVID, but I know that I have lots of friends that changed careers at that time because they just thought, I can't do this. You know, when the government was sort of like not giving any money to the arts, even if I worked at a shop, I'd be okay. So I know what it's like to question whether it's time to stop. For me, that's always been a brief moment because I realize that I can't really do anything else. It's the only thing that I'm qualified for, so I better stay with it. But the moral, I guess, is to go with your heart. And that his reasoning through the show is because he has a conversation with his friend who's dying. And he's just found out this information, and he's so close. And I believe that he really was in real life as well, very close to giving up. And when he wrote Tick Tick Boom, he's right on that moment. That's what the show's about, is him trying to work out whether it's worth it. He'd already written another show. I spent 5 years on it, nothing. Then he writes Tick Tick Boom, takes him another 5 years. And that show was a lot of interest in it, but it still at that time was a little bit too out there and wasn't quite right for Broadway at that time. Because what his writing, for anyone that hasn't heard his music, is really out there for Broadway. Broadway at the time was sort of anywhere between a chorus line and The Sound of Music or Oklahoma, or Gypsy, you know, shows that were sort of an older generation. And he brought rock and roll and pop, like really good pop, to the stage, and he did that through Rent. And if he quit, he never would have written Rent, and music would, like Hamilton, wouldn't exist if he quit. But he didn't, and he stayed with it, and he only survived another 5 years. So it took him 5 years to write Rent, and then he died just before it opened. And then after he died, he won the Pulitzer Prize and could have afforded a car and could have afforded life insurance. I mean, he died without even life insurance. So it's so sad, but what a great message that he was being asked, and then he asks the audience, why do we do it? Why do we, great song at the end called Why, and he sings, why do we, I love the imagery that he says, why do we run our finger through the flame, or like do things that are kind of dangerous because we know that we're in for some pain? Why do we do it? And the reason is because that's what brings life into us, or what excites us. And we know that falling in love often can lead to pain. There's a risk, but why do we do it? Because it's so good, and because it's so nice to do that. Why do we take risks, and why am I putting myself out there on stage and doing this incredibly difficult piece of work when people might hate it? Or, I'm doing it because I love it, and because I'm an entertainer and I can't stop. So, there's easier things. I definitely could do a less stressful job, I'm sure.
But there's growth in the challenge, and even in the way you put it, of having to go through these transitions and, in a sense, reinvent yourself. That, I think, is something that many people can relate to, because whether it's a career reinvention or a personal reinvention as seasons of life shift, we've all got to do it at some point or other. How have you done that in your life? Because I feel like as fans, and many of your friends will have witnessed you go through these really distinct career phases and personal shifts as well.
Yeah, it's something that I feel that I'm really lucky to have grasped early on. And I guess maybe that's through my training or education, or even through my father was a wonderful entertainer. He was a great singer. He still sang his whole life, but his father made him, do work for the family business and do the right thing. He had 7 children, but he still sang every night. He had like a big band, 30-piece big band, a jazz quartet, and he sang with all the big guys when they came, like Frank Sinatra and everything. So he was recognized, but it wasn't really his full thing. But I saw my father, he was a very practical man. Like when his dad needed parking out the back of his furniture store, and the council wouldn't give it to him, so Dad joined the council, and then he got the parking, and then he went on to become the mayor as well.
Wow.
But I guess I like the practicality of what he did, and how I used to watch how he could create shows so easily. And I guess with my career, when I go and speak to students at, say, NIDA or WAPA, sometimes I go in there and I say, well, who can do, so you're all actors, who can sing here? And, a couple of hands will go up. Or who can dance? And, a couple. And I said, well, go and learn it. If you didn't put your hand up, these are things that you can learn. People think that you can't learn how to sing, but you can. And if you really struggle with that, well, then take up piano or learn French, because the more skills that you have, the more easily you can navigate your way through times where there is no work. And for actors especially, I'm always encouraging them, young actors, to learn all these skills and write your own show, because when work stops, to be able to go and do like Hugh Sheridan Live, or I created a show called Human. I started a band called the California Crooners Club. These were all things that I just did to fill in the gaps, and it sort of helps, because I'm a firm believer that work generates work, and the more as long as you're good, as long as you show up and do the work. Otherwise, sometimes people have reputations like they're not going to work anymore. But I always say, take the jobs, even if you think it's beneath you or whatever. To young actors, playing a dog in a dog food commercial is not bad. Even
just do it.
Because someone's going to say they were so good and so convincing, and now we're doing The Lion King and we need some lions, and they were really good. You know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
I hope that answers it. But I think also just being in regards to my personal life, I always just follow my heart in being as honest as I can, and also trying to use my platform within our country to help people. Like, you know, to sort of, I think one of the gifts about playing Ben Rafter is the start of my professional career in Australia, where people got to know me, was that Ben and I, you know, had a lot in common. Like, I brought a lot of me to him. And so people often feel like they know me really well because they know Ben really well.
Yeah.
And Ben went through a lot of trouble in his life in the show. You know, we saw him go on a huge journey as well. And I think that was something that I was really lucky to play, like lucky to be able to show that, and show that it's okay to cry for young guys, like a young guy, to be able to really grieve and feel sad, and also to express love of your family, and that it's actually cool to love your mum and your dad. Like, that's cool, that's fine. To go out of your way to help your brothers and sisters, to really worry about them, to really have genuine concern and put other people first. And that was a lot of, I think Ben could have gone a different way had someone else played him. Not that there's a right or a wrong way, but I'm really glad that I got to create that character with the writers. And really, one of the first things on the first episode, one of the things that I read in the first scene, it was just with his mum, and it says he loves his mum. It was a side note. I think that's a really good indicator, because it was sort of written there to make sure that whoever was playing the character took that moment to have a look at his mum and go, like, there was no words or anything. It was just he loves her. And I think that that's a key to sort of me and him. That was fine and natural for me to do, but to continuously carry the responsibility, and I will say responsibility because I think it is, to keep letting people know that this is my life, and very hard to not have it public in a small country. So yeah, when people know what's going on, just to shine a light on it and say, this is okay, this is important to me, and this, and don't worry about that, don't focus on that. But yeah, so good.
It's good because you give people someone to, I guess, maybe use as a point of reflection to say, how do I process my own emotions? How do I process the times where I want to cry, or the times where I just need to get it all off my chest? And people then have an example of how to do that. And I think it's really valuable, particularly as someone like yourself who has lived a life largely in the public where there's so much scrutiny, and where from the very beginning of your, you know, training, you had people saying, you're never going to do this, you're not going to end up on TV and film. And then you've had people really support you in your corner. What kind of impact does that scrutiny have on you, that feeling of constantly being looked at and people having opinions about what you do?
It's so funny because it never, it's interesting for me. As just who I am, I don't know whether it's because I was born a Cancerian, because they say that they're very sensitive water signs, and I go, well, that's sort of true. And I was also born, excuse me, was born on the week of the empath. I'm only saying this because I was just on the phone to a friend of mine who's an astrologer, and she was reading me all this stuff just this morning. And it was funny because I was thinking about how much those moments can affect you, and how it is hurtful when people say things to you, like to your face. Like when I was at drama school, and that's funny you mentioned that, when my teacher said, you're never going to be on television or film. I didn't actually mind that one as much, but other things that people can write where they can pass judgment or say things that are totally untrue, like so contradictory to the truth. And that can be really hurtful, because you just think, well, these people, they don't know me at all, and I don't know who they are. I wouldn't know from a bar of soap. But then they're writing things that, or saying things that will reach a lot of people. And I think you're right in knowing that there are people that are in your corner, and knowing that that's one person's opinion, or that I don't know, they have no idea. But also sort of trusting that the universe has a bigger plan and there's a bigger picture. And a lot of those things and a lot of the moments that have been sort of harder in life, again, I think that there's a bigger picture for it. There's a bigger reason. And maybe I'm just part of that. I'm just one small part of it. And when things do go wrong or something like that, I don't mind being someone that can take that on if it's going to help other people. And it can be hard at the time, but it's also like, it helps me grow as well. Like you were saying before, through risk and through hardship, you grow, and you just got to keep going and trust that whatever it is will pass, and whatever's next is going to be better. And that's what life is. So it's always up and downs. And I look back and I think I've been very, very lucky with my career, and lucky to keep going. And so you can't really complain, not when there's real turmoil happening overseas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It gives you a bit of perspective. And I think the longer you live, you do really realize the truth of that cliche that this too shall pass. You know, it really, really does. And you've always struck me as somebody who is very hopeful in the way that you speak about life. And I've heard you say so many times that the best is yet to come, and wanting to remind people of that. Where does that sense of hope in the future come from for you? Is it something innate? Is it something you have to work at building up?
I think it was just something that was in me. Like as a child, I used to be very excited for the future and what it could bring. And hope's a big word for me. It's actually a big word that I use in the show. I didn't think about that until then. And so poignant on Hope FM.
Yeah.
But that's one of the, John's trying to think of a word for something, and the first word he thinks of is hope. And someone says, what? And he says, hope. Like, and then he's in a hopeless situation in the show, but he's hopeful too. And I guess Jonathan Larson was a very hopeful person, which is why he stuck with it. Thank goodness. But I think it's just an innate thing with me. And I often encourage people. I get people contacting me on Instagram a lot for advice. And if you're someone that's listening that has, and you haven't heard back from me, just try again, because there's so many. And I sort of seed through them where I can, when I've got time, and I sort of have a look. And I also want to take time, because a lot of them are questions that people really want to know the answer to and want my advice. And I feel blessed that they come to me to ask, or feel that I'm someone that can help them, or that they're like, I think he'll respond, like. And I definitely try to, because often they're questions about their children, or a lot of them are about relationships, some of them about career, all different kinds of things. And sometimes it's people that are they're in a rut, and they're feeling sad, and they've got questions about, sometimes it's about identity, and there's men and women and all sorts of different people that identify as all kinds of things. And I'm generally very much like, keep going, it's going to be fine. Sometimes they're more specific, but it's always just like, take your time and trust in yourself. And there's no rush with anything, because I think people feel enormous pressure in this day and age to be something. You have to be something. You have to know your pronouns and all this sort of thing. I'm not like that. I've never thought like that. And if I've ever had to say anything about myself, it's because I have felt the pressure for so long. And I usually say it in a way that is, I'm telling you this because I'm saying it on behalf of everyone else that doesn't want to say it.
Yeah.
Leave it alone. Like, live and let live. And I guess that sort of, in going back to what you were asking, it's just more about like just trusting and knowing that you're okay where you are, and that things will get better. I think hope's a really wonderful way to look towards the future, especially if you're watching the news, and it can be so tough looking at what's happening, and I suppose the total opposite of hope is fear.
Mm.
And we have to make the choice. But living in fear is, proven to be very bad for you. And it's easy for us to fall into that, especially after coming through COVID and all this. Like, the fastest way to lower your immune system is through fear.
Mm.
And that's a fact. So choose hope and know that the future is bright and full of promise, and the best is yet to come.
Yeah, it's good for our well-being. And I want to finish up, Hugh, with a question that I ask many of our guests. I mean, this podcast, it's called Undistracted. We talk about living your life in pursuit of the things that you feel drawn toward, that you find your purpose in. For you, what would that look like? If you were going to live completely in line with the things that you feel drawn toward, what would it be to be undistracted as Hugh Sheridan?
Wow, that's a good one. Because if anything, I'm so distracted by so many different things going on in my life. I think, last year I was trying to buy a farm, and it was a beautiful farm and it had over 300 animals on it. And
Wow.
the family was so sweet. They didn't want to sell it, and it was a big piece of land. That's why I did The Masked Singer. They had asked me to do it for so many years, and I just sort of thought, no, I will never do that show. But I really wanted this farm, and I thought, I need a job quickly because I need to get a check coming in so that I can go.
You need your farm deposit.
Yeah. I've got a job, I swear. I'm dressing up as a chook and going and singing songs on the TV show. It's a real job. But I missed out on the farm. It was my birthday. I came back to Australia, and I couldn't tell anyone that I was here because I was doing the show secret. And it was pouring with rain and freezing. And I thought, and then I got a message saying they just sold the farm. I was just 1 week too late. Or they'd sold it 1 week early. But sitting out on the farm sort of actually made me, I was so sad about it because I thought I really liked the idea of having a place where I could settle. And even if I had to go away and work, but I thought, if I can settle there and I could have children, and I've had one day if I meet someone, and I just liked the idea that I would have somewhere to raise a family, and I loved that there were animals there, and I told the family that they could stay there as well and live on the animals, and it all just fell through. But what was nice about it was that sort of missing out on it made me realize how much I want that. And how much I really, do want to have that for myself. Yeah. And also for everyone that's in my life as well, to have a place where everyone can come and feel like that. So I guess that's my hopeful dream for the future. I hope that I find another one, or by a miracle that one just appears again on the market.
Yeah. You
never know.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that that's I think that's what I want, and I would feel undistracted.
Yeah. For you need somewhere that's like a grounding, a place to come back to, and a base, I guess, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, just to have and I think, to have that in Australia and to be here. And also, one of the things that people often ask me, what do you miss most about Australia when you're gone? Do you miss your family? And of course I miss my family, but I do come back enough. I'm back and forth a lot, but I'm here enough to see my family, and I'm from Adelaide, and I probably spend more time in Adelaide than my siblings that live interstate. So, and I live overseas. So, but I really miss the land. That's Australia. The sounds, in the summer of the little buzzing by the ocean, or the sound of the ocean, or that dense heat in South Australia. It's the land. I miss the animals, and I miss the bird noises and the dirt and the cold ocean. So yeah, I think it's nice to sort of know that that's what I want, is to never be far from Australia.
Yeah, and I do love that you said the missing out was something that made you realise how much you wanted it too, because that can be such a clarifying thing for a lot of people listening as well. But Hugh, thank you so much for sharing some of your time with us today, and just some of who you are really means a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really enjoyed joining with you.